Hey everyone, this is Nick, and if there's a desktop environment that I haven't given enough love over the years, it's definitely the Deepin desktop. It's mostly available on the distro of the same name, but you can also get it on Manjaro or Ubuntu. The last time I looked at it was 3 years ago, and Deepin at the time was hands down the most beautiful desktop environment that you could get on Linux. But since then, it has evolved a lot, and GNOME, KDE, and others also have progressed a ton in the looks department. So let's see if Deepin can claw its way onto the podium next to GNOME, KDE, and Elementary OS. What definitely makes it to the podium, though, is today's sponsor, Internext. Thanks to Internext for sponsoring this video. They offer you some cloud storage space focused on privacy and security. They encrypt all the data you store on your Internext drive, and your data isn't visible by any third party at any point during the upload, storage, or download process. Everything is encrypted end-to-end and GDPR compliant. Internext offers you an online drive and a photo storage solution in the same package, complete with syncing, sharing, and backups, and they have apps for all platforms to handle all of that, including Linux, macOS, Windows, Android, and iOS, so you can get all your files on all your devices. You can get 10 gigabytes for free, and they have plans that go up to 2 terabytes for €8.99 per month. And if you want an even better deal, you can use my code LinuxExperiment, written in the description below, to get 25% off your purchase of an annual plan for 2 terabytes of storage. So click the link in the description below to learn more and use the offer code LinuxExperiment and start storing your files securely and privately. Okay, let's start with the desktop shell. And by default, you can clearly tell that Deepin is aiming at Windows users, where Deepin clearly was more interested in macOS users before, with the default layout being basically the macOS dock with a menu attached to it and the possibility to switch to a Windows-like layout. Now, both layouts are more Windows-like. The default one, Fashion Mode, is more Windows 11 inspired, with a floating panel, centered task list and app shortcuts, indicators on the right, but keeping the menu in the bottom left corner. The other mode, called Efficient Mode, is basically the previous Windows layout, with the panel stuck to the bottom and the task list aligned to the left. Whether a Windows 10 layout should be called Efficient and a Windows 11 layout should be called Fashion, I'll leave that up to you. All I'll say is that it's not these specific terms that I would have picked. You can set the dock to auto-hide intelligently or always, and you can set its screen edge and its size. The main Deepin menu lets you open apps or quickly access certain preset folders, and it has search and a category view, as well as your power options to reboot, shut down, or log out. You can turn this menu into a full-screen grid of apps like what GNOME offers, or like the macOS equivalent, although you can display apps per categories here as well, that appear as scrolling folders. Apps in the grid can be rearranged, but you cannot create your own folders, unfortunately. It's all very familiar if you ever had the distinct pleasure of using Windows at any point in your life. Well, I say pleasure, but that's because I'm a masochist. Now, jokes aside, it works pretty well, and it looks really good while doing it. The indicators in the bottom right get you a notification center, which looks good. You get power options, an on-screen keyboard for touch devices, access to the Grand Search tool, which I'll talk about in a minute, and a quick screenshot button. The rest of the indicators can be collapsed or expanded, and they work as you would expect, with a few quick options by clicking them. You can decide to always show or hide some of these in the dock settings. Now let's talk about search, or Grand Search as they call it. You gotta love that specific brand of English that you often seem to find in Chinese developed products. Although, who am I to talk about someone else's English, because I'm a Frenchman with an horrible English accent. Grand Search is basically Spotlight from macOS. You can open it by hitting Shift plus space, and it lets you search through files, folders, documents, apps, settings, or even web searches. All of these can be toggled off individually if you prefer to really limit your search, and it's a pretty grand tool to have, although it doesn't seem to search inside of files like a full text search for documents, for example. Now let's finish with the task list, which works as you would expect. One click to start an app, right click to get a jump list of various options, and apps that aren't docked appear at the end of the list, where you can pin them by using the not very clear dock option from the right-click menu. Dragging an undocked app from the end of the list to another spot in the dock also doesn't pin it, which is weird, as that's generally the behavior every dock has. And thankfully, this task list has click to minimize, so you do not need to hunt for that minimize button. The desktop shell is good. It's not aiming at people who want to customize everything, it's more of a like it or don't use it situation, but there is a lot to like here. At least if a Windows layout doesn't make you run away screaming. Now let's talk looks, because Deepin is, in my opinion, the most beautiful desktop you can get on Linux. Not only because it's nice and modern and a bit flashy, but also because that design actually seems well thought out. The first thing is, do not use Deepin in a VM, it won't let you use the compositor and the desktop effects, and so you're going to miss out on a lot of what makes it look good. I installed the Deepin distro on a spare laptop to make sure I got the real experience, and holy crap is it impressive! The default look of the desktop is all soft transparency with blur, rounded corners, nice little highlights. It's just a joy to use and navigate. I mean, I do like how GNOME, Elementary or KDE look by default, their look and feel is fine, but compared to how Deepin looks out of the box, it's not even close. And of course, it's a personal thing. If you hate transparency, blur and all that modern crap, then Deepin isn't going to woo you. I'm generally not really in favor of pushing effects and looks over function, but here, I really feel that they struck a really good compromise between looks and usability. The effects here serve a purpose. The desktop itself isn't super heavy on effects and transitions. Window animations are really fast and only happen when you minimize, maximize or tile a window, or when opening the notification panel. Everything else is simply a nice quick fade in, so you don't get parts of the interface zooming in and out all the time. The blur and transparency only apply to the desktop elements themselves, and the apps have a solid white or black background with very good contrast. You get very dark gray text and buttons with blue highlights by default. The default theme Deepin apps use is also used on other apps you decide to install, GTK or KDE apps, or even stuff like LibreOffice, and all apps look sort of coherent like that. It's rare enough to be noted, although you might want to favor GNOME and GTK apps over KDE apps, as their header bars are going to integrate a lot better with the rest of the Deepin apps. Menu bars aren't really welcome here. Hey, menu bars aren't welcome anywhere anymore. Get out of there with your small click targets and your text everywhere, or at least have the decency to slot yourself into a global menu. Of course, you can tweak all of that with a dark mode or an auto, light and dark switch, and accent colors. You can also disable effects, tweak transparency, and adjust the rounded corners to be square, small, or large. The icon theme is good, and you get an out-of-the-box choice between a few options, just like with the cursor theme. It is a very, very good-looking desktop. But once you start to step outside of the walled garden, you see the cracks in the wall itself. Basically, everything you install that is not a default Deepin app will look sort of weird, with accent colors not being picked up by GTK apps, rounded corners not necessarily being respected, and sort of highlight and contrast issues using the dark mode. It's just not perfect when you use not Deepin apps. Window management on Deepin desktop is pretty basic. It has edge tiling and drag up to maximize as you would expect, although corner tiling isn't there. It also has a multitasking view that combines virtual desktops and an expose view of all your currently open apps. This view is pretty laggy and doesn't feel very smooth, with choppy animations, even on a relatively good integrated AMD GPU at high performance mode. It looks good, but it's not very fluid. There are touchpad gestures as well to switch between desktops and activate the multitasking view, but these aren't really good either. First, they are not one-to-one, as what you would get on Wayland with GNOME and KDE, or even on X11 with PopOS and Elementary. These gestures activate once you finish moving your fingers, and it doesn't feel great. Second, they're hard to pull off. 4 fingers up should bring the multitasking view, but half the time it just opens the main menu. It's not a fantastic experience, and most, if not all, other desktop environments have this solved for a while now. And since Deepin uses Kwin as its window manager, which is the same window manager as what KDE uses, it should absolutely be able to deal with this. There is also no holding super to drag a window from anywhere, which is weird. I tried the Alt key, but it doesn't work either. Apart from that, apps use a familiar window button layout with minimize, maximize, and close on the right side of the window, and the default apps use header bars, which I like. So yeah, it's pretty basic. It's not lacking much, but the stuff that's implemented isn't really up to code, basically. Other desktops just do it better in 2022. And there are also absolutely no configuration options for window behavior in here either. Although at least new windows you open have the decency to open centered, which is something. Deepin Desktop comes with a lot of apps and utilities. The file manager looks good, but it's on the same level as Nautilus in terms of feature set. You have tabs, an icon view or a list view with an optional properties panel. It can search, sort, open as administrator or open in a terminal, and it does have a few nice settings, like single click to open, choosing the default folder when opening a new window, selecting icon sizes, enabling full text search inside of documents, and a few other things. It's basically exactly like the GNOME file manager, which also means you need to press Ctrl+L to actually edit the path bar manually. Yeah, I'm petty like that, but seriously, can you name a single reason why it would be confusing for anyone to click on a URL bar and get a typable URL like in a web browser? Name one in the comments, I dare you. The web browser is just another Chromium derivative, based on an old Chromium version on top of that, so I wouldn't recommend using it over virtually anything else. No reason not to use your usual favorite browser. Which has better be Firefox, by the way. Just kidding, just use whatever you like. Or use Firefox. Or use anything else. The terminal emulator is also relatively simple, with tabs, a few visual options, customizable keyboard shortcuts, but no profiles or customizable colors. You can add custom commands that you can invoke quickly from a side panel, and it can handle a list of remote servers to access quickly. Good app, good enough for most people who only drop in the terminal for a few command lines here and then. Probably not powerful enough for terminal diehards though. Then you have a basic calendar app that cannot sync with any kind of online account, and a pretty good email client with integrations with a few Chinese providers as well as Gmail or Yahoo, but that also works with generic IMAP accounts as well. It's actually a really good email client in my opinion. It's fast, it has support for calendar and contacts, a bunch of configuration options. It lets you create new folders or labels, it lets you pin messages, mark as spam or unmark as spam, something neither Kmail or Geary do, and it has a very fast search tool that works really well. Honestly, I could see myself using Deepin Mail outside of the Deepin desktop while I wait for Thunderbird to fix their interface in their next release. You also get a very basic image viewer that can do OCR but no image editing. You get a local music player that's okay, a simple PDF viewer, a text editor, and a movie player. You get a paint-like tool and a powerful screenshot tool that lets you immediately annotate the screenshot as you take it, which is nice. You also get a download manager, a scanning tool, a voice note utility, a nice-looking system monitor, a calculator, a Debian package installer, a disk utility, a font manager, an archive manager, and a webcam tool. And you also get a very complete user manual for the whole desktop and all apps, which is really nice. And its English translations aren't even that bad. Or are they? Okay, sorry, I'll stop about the badly translated Chinese to English jokes. Although it is an important point. If your main language isn't English or Chinese, the Deepin translations might not be as complete or as high quality as on other desktop environments, since Deepin isn't used all that much outside of China compared to GNOME or KDE, so this might be something to look out for. Now, the set of default apps is really good, really comprehensive, and basically everything that's shipped is good enough for the usage of most people. It's just a very cool set of applications, including some very good ones like the email client, the system monitor, and the very complete device manager. And then there's the Deepin App Store. I'm not sure you get this one if you're not using Deepin as a distro, and there are advantages and downsides to that. First, it's a beautiful looking piece of software, which unfortunately doesn't respect your dark mode. It handles app updates, but not system updates, which are located in the settings, and it lets you search through all apps you've installed or that you'd want to install. On the Deepin distro though, it's a mess. The App Store isn't well stocked at all, and most apps you will find are outdated, like very outdated. GNOME Calendar was version 3.30, for example. That's 6 main releases behind. 6! Ocular hasn't seen an update since March 2021, and a lot more seem completely out of date, probably because Deepin as a distro uses Debian as a base, and so has very old, outdated apps in its repos. Others seem more up to date, like Audacity or OnlyOffice. But the Deepin App Store has also some very interesting features. First, it has editorial content with big categories that link to a list of apps related to a specific purpose, like what you would find on the Mac App Store. You still don't get these nice articles like what Apple has, and most text in here is in Chinese and isn't following your system language, but it is still pretty handy to discover applications. And second, it has app bundles that you can install in one click. Now supposedly it also has Windows and Android apps available in there, but I couldn't find any. So the Deepin App Store isn't really good, but not in its design. The design is actually really nice. And the app bundles, the app discoverability, and the look and feel are things that I wish you could find on GNOME software or on Discover. But the repos and the app selection is just abysmal compared to what you would get even on elementary OS. It's just not good. So, Deepin as a desktop. Yes, it's a really nice looking desktop, but it's not just for show. It also does look legible, intuitive, and it's a really complete desktop environment with a huge number of utilities and applications that will be enough for most people. It's not extremely configurable. I would put its config options on the same level as GNOME with GNOME tweaks installed. So higher than elementary OS, but way lower than KDE. But there are some caveats. First, the touchpad gestures are just no good compared to what you're used to on other desktops. Second, there are some fluidity issues with window management. And third, the whole desktop lacks integration with any kind of online account, which is really bad. I would also advise to use Deepin DE outside of the Deepin distro. While the spyware concerns of old seem mostly dissipated as the code is open source, and no one really has noticed anything weird going on in a long time, the issues remains that it uses an old kernel version, old libraries, and old repos. I think Deepin will be a much better experience using Ubuntu DDE or Manjaro Deepin. So, would I use Deepin as my main desktop? Well, honestly, it's not far off. Fix the performance issues in the multitasking view, fix the touchpad gestures, and add some kind of Nextcloud online account integration, and I'm in. I will save it a slot on one of my laptops. One of my laptops that I got from today's sponsor, Tuxedo. Tuxedo is a company based in Germany that makes computers with Linux pre-installed. You can pick from a selection of very popular distributions when you configure your own device, or you can install anything you like, knowing that the compatibility is basically 100%. And if there are some tweaks needed, you have access to all the configurations that Tuxedo made in their repos that they offer as well. So it's just all good. They have a huge lineup from the smallest NUCs and Ultrabooks to the biggest gaming towers and gaming laptops, and you can configure basically every machine with CPU options, GPUs, RAM, storage, whatever, keyboard layouts, everything. You can even add your own logo, laser etched on the back. I just bought the Stellaris 15 from them, which is their high-end gaming laptop, workstation laptop thingy, and I use it to edit all my videos. It has very powerful GPUs, very powerful CPUs. It's just a very nice machine with the best keyboard I've used, period. You can check to see the review in, I don't know which corner it's going to appear, but the review is up there. So if you need a new device that you can be sure runs Linux 100%, click the link in the description below, get a Tuxedo device, they're really nice. And so, that concludes this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, to write a comment, you know the drill. And if you didn't like the video, well, don't hesitate, drop a dislike, leave a comment, tell me why it sucked. And if you don't know what to do with all the cash you probably all have lying around, click the super thanks button below the video, click the PayPal link in the description, or join my Patreons or YouTube members. You'll get access to a weekly podcast and the right to vote on the next topics I'll cover. So thanks everyone for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!